Alright, I want to start this off by saying that this is not any sort of hit piece. I am not trying to claim that I am a better dungeon master than anyone in this video. I mean, after all, I got all these horror stories from videos of their own where they talk about the lessons that they learned. So yeah, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here, but I do want to show you guys that anyone can have a bad experience with TTRPGs, even people who play these games for a living. After all, we're all human, and when you add the human factor to anything, it makes stuff a heck of a lot more complicated. And so today, as we do often on this channel, we're going to be learning from horror stories, but we're going to be learning from horror stories, particularly from some of your favorite and my favorite, my favorite D&D YouTubers. So yeah, I had a lot of fun putting this together. We might do this again in the future. So yeah, let me know if you guys enjoy with a like down below. But in any case, I think that's enough introing. Time to get into the video. Without further ado, let's get started. Alright, the first horror story comes from Blaine Simple. He just finished running his first D&D game. Fresh out of high school, he was looking for money and realized that Roll20 hosted pay-to-play games. And he was thinking, oh my god, this is the perfect opportunity. I feel like a great dungeon master right now, and I think I could run paid D&D games, make some extra money on the side to supplement my retail job, because we all know how much those pay. So yeah, he started running paid games on Roll20. And while this seemed like a good idea at the start, it quickly turned into a bad one. Now, there are multiple lessons to learn here. First and foremost, let's go chronological order. After running your first D&D campaign, you feel like a god. Seriously, it's the best feeling in the world. That moment when you tell your players that you're going to close the campaign, and the moment you all spend hours talking about the game and all the stuff that happened during it. I mean, that was excellent. And frankly, you should feel good. Most dungeon masters do not ever run a full multi-year long campaign in their entire D&D career. I'm going to tell you right now, if you haven't had that experience, try your best to attain it, because it does feel amazing. But you can't let it get too much in your head. I'm not saying you shouldn't feel proud. You should feel proud. Absolutely. You should revel in this moment. But remember something. Remember that you are a phenomenal DM. You are. But you are particularly a phenomenal DM with that group that you ran the game for. That group who like your style, who like the way you run D&D, or whatever TTRPG you're playing. That doesn't mean you're a great DM for everybody. I mean, I think Matt Mercer is like the best DM ever. I love watching his games. But he's not the best DM for everybody. Not everyone would enjoy the type of game that he runs. And, you know, that's okay. It's a good thing that D&D has so much variety. I mean, there's tons of people who put in my comments, like, I'd love to play with you. But would you? I don't think either of us actually know, because we've never actually tried it. And frankly, I think I'm a great DM, but again, I'm a great DM for the people I run the game for. I'm not a great DM for everybody. But when you're running paid D&D, a lot of people forget about that. They want to get as many customers as possible, and therefore they open their doors wide. And that's what Blaine Simple did. He opened his doors wide to whoever. And from one perspective, that's great. You accept everybody, you have tons of people playing, you give them tons of opportunities, but at the same time, you accept people that might not enjoy the game that you're playing if you just throw open your doors. D&D and all TTRPGs, whatever you're running, they're highly specific if you're doing paid DMing. You do not have a wide niche. You have a very narrow margin of audience. And therefore, you need to cater to that audience. You need to actively find that audience. That doesn't mean just session zeros. That also means, you know, detailed descriptions of what kind of DM you are, what kind of game you run. There's nothing, I swear to God, that bothers me on Start Playing more than like a vague, I roleplay and I also do combat on the description for a paid game. Like seriously, I don't do paid D&D, but if I did, I would skip right past every single one of those, because what kind of vague crap is that? You need to be at least a little specific when it comes to describing your game, so you find people who actually want to stick around. Blaine had lots of experiences of people just dropping out, and it's a whole horror story on another way, because the way they dropped out was they told him, oh, my dog died, or oh, my grandma just passed away, or oh, I have exams. And I think there's a 50-50 chance they were actually telling the truth, but as Blaine admits in that video, there was also a good chance that they wanted to get out of the game. And again, it's not because Blaine is a bad DM. I think he's a great DM. I haven't played with him, but he seems like a good dude who would run a pretty good game. But here's the thing. He's not a great DM for everybody, and throwing your doors wide open like that is going to expose that really quickly. You need to accept the fact that you have a narrow niche and find people that fall within it. Now, in Blaine's video, he views treating D&D like a business to be a mistake. And from the game perspective, I think that is true. And trying to accept as many customers as possible, I think that is also a mistake. But here's the thing. When you're running paid D&D, you do need to remember something. I do disagree on this. You do need to remember the business aspect. Because we often talk about how you shouldn't expect DMs to be Matt Mercer or Matt Colville or Chris Perkins. You shouldn't expect that from people because that's unrealistic. Here's the thing, though. If you're running a game where I'm paying $30 a session, which is a price point I often see on Start Playing, I'm not saying you need to be Matt Mercer, but you need to get close to that kind of quality because, oh my god, I mean, $30 a session every week. I mean, you're paying $120 a month. That is a lot of freaking money. I mean, that's as much money as cable TV. That's probably a bad example. That's as much money as a lot of subscription services put together. How about that? It's a lot of money is my point. And therefore, you should try your best to run a really great game. Look, your players do have expectations for you now. They have expectations because they're paying for this experience. And yeah, you do have a responsibility to cater to that. And by the way, this isn't me trying to slag Blaine Simple for being a bad DM. Like I said before, I think he's probably a really good DM. I haven't played with him before, but I'm pretty sure he's great at the game. I mean, he wouldn't make the great videos that he makes if he wasn't good at this damn game, right? But here's the thing. You do need to remember the business aspect of what you're doing. You need to remember the responsibility you have to your players. And if you don't want to have that constantly ringing in your head, if that stresses you out, that's okay. Like Blaine says in that video, you don't need to run paid D&D. Look, it is hard. There is pressure. You do need to cater to an audience, and you do need to treat it like a business to a degree where you have responsibilities. You will need to consider your customers' requests when you're running the game, and therefore, there is going to be some pressure. If you can't handle that pressure, that's okay. You don't need to run paid D&D games. And if you can't handle that pressure, I think you shouldn't run paid D&D games. Again, I don't think that's a horrible thing or like a disgrace. I tried running a business-focused D&D game myself, an actual play, 2 of them, in fact, and, well, it didn't work out in the long term. Now, let me make this clear. I think the Shower of Carconos and Crown of Deceit are some of the coolest things I've ever done, and I will never regret that experience, but it was some of the hardest I've ever worked in my life, and that shouldn't be what D&D is. I shouldn't frame the months where I'm running D&D games as some of the hardest months of my life. Seriously. I understand why Blaine just decided to turn off his computer in the middle of a session because that kind of pressure, it gets to you. And not everyone needs to experience that kind of pressure. This is a game, after all. And not wanting that kind of pressure, that's fine. If you can't handle it, it doesn't make you weak or anything like that. It just makes you freaking reasonable in my mind. It's okay to just treat D&D as a fun hobby that you're doing for enjoyment, right? Not everything needs to be a business. So yeah, there you go. The lessons from Blaine Simple's horror story. If you want some more lessons, his video is linked in the cards, as will all the videos we talk about here. Let's get into the next one. Ginny D. Okay, so this is a bit different. This is Ginny D's first time ever playing D&D. She was working at the Colorado Renaissance Fair, and during the wee hours of the night, she and her fellow Ren Fair employees were sitting around and hanging out and drinking, and then somebody recommends, like, hey, we should all play Dungeons and Dragons. And no one really took it seriously until they actually started playing Dungeons and Dragons at, like, 10 p.m. at night, or more specifically, they started making characters for Dungeons and Dragons at 10 p.m. at night. They actually started playing in the wee hours of the morning, and that went about as well as you think it would go, with a bunch of drunk people, 10 of them in fact, with a bunch of new players who had never even rolled dice before, trying their best to do a pickup D&D session at like 1 a.m. Oh my god. So, yeah, not exactly the best first-time experience. I understand why Ginny framed D&D as, at the time, confusing and frustrating, because, yeah, that is a confusing and frustrating experience. I've seen stories like this on the RPG Horror Stories subreddit, And a lot of people frame it as, what's the big deal? It was just a one-shot. You had a 4-hour bad experience. What the heck is wrong with that? But there is something wrong with that. That's Ginny's first ever experience. That's many people's first ever experience. And Ginny frames it as throwing someone in the deep end. I frame it as somebody throwing someone into the ocean with a freaking anchor tied around their leg. Because, oh my god, how are you supposed to have a good time under those circumstances? Look, D&D and super casual, they don't usually mix oil and water, you know what I mean? And that was a super casual thrown into the deep end session that does not communicate what D&D is and made the game naturally frustrating for a variety of reasons. Number one, this is coming from someone who does take a little something before sessions to buzz me up a little bit, to make me a bit more casual. But even coming from a guy like me who does do that, you shouldn't be drunk and trying to run D&D. It is a game that requires this, and taking substances that affect this too much is probably a bad idea. I mean, look, it seems like, oh, fun and games, drunken D&D, it could be a lot of fun, but it could also be a horrible disaster, especially if there's 10 people involved, and that's the next big thing. I mean, holy crap, could you imagine your first D&D experience being one with a bunch of other people, that many other people? I mean, dang, my head wants to explode when I'm running for 6 people. I cannot imagine trying to run a game for 10, especially so many of them being new. Number 3, this was a surprise. D&D should not be a surprise. D&D's not freaking Mario Kart, okay? You can't just say, hey guys, let's play D&D randomly in the middle of a party, alright? I mean, yeah, you can try, but D&D isn't something you can just pick up and play randomly, especially if you're brand new. There are a lot of rules to this game that need explaining, and if you want people to have a good experience, you do need to take it a little bit seriously. I'm not trying to frame this as you should be uptight about it or anything like that, but you do need to cater to that new player experience. I mean, Ginny's whole video covering this horror story is about this, but I'll sum up the tips. Basically, in my own experience playing with new players, you do need to explain to them the game. You need to accept them into a group where they're going to be comfortable, in an environment where they're going to be having a good time role-playing and doing something that generally is pretty weird and dorky. In an environment where everyone is drunk and tired at 1 a.m., that's not exactly the best environment to first introduce someone into the game. When you're working with new players, you do need to keep that in mind. It's not just something that you can just do whenever, at whatever session, at whatever time. It's something you need to consider. Otherwise, you risk alienating someone from the hobby. And yeah, oh, it's just one player, what's the big deal? But do you really want to be that guy who ruins the game for a new player? I wouldn't blame Ginny if she never wanted to come back to D&D again. That experience, like she said, boring, frustrating, confusing, not awesome. And if she never wanted to come to the game again, that would totally make frickin' sense, man. But thank God she found Critical Role and we got a great YouTuber out of it. But yeah, remember that when you are playing Dungeons & Dragons, as a dungeon master, you need to care new players. And as new players, you need to find a dungeon master who will cater to your experience as well. In my own first D&D game that I was running as a dungeon master, I did throw my players in the deep end. Maybe not this bad, but from a roleplay standpoint, I really wasn't helping them. All these people, they've never roleplayed before, and I was running Curse of Strahd. Now, is Curse of Strahd the most grimdark story ever? No. But is it the most casual story ever? Also no. I mean, brand new role players, expecting them to be able to respond to the super dark story elements that I added into Curse of Strahd, that was not reasonable of me. I mean, I was actively hurting my players' ability to grow as role players by just throwing them into intense roleplay scenarios. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't toss your players in scenarios that make them uncomfortable, both in-game with my Curse of Strahd example and out-of-game with Ginny D's incredible Ren Fair first-time experience. Alright, can't exaggerate this enough. Catastrophic Failure from Running the Game by Matt Colville is probably the most important D&D video I've ever watched when trying to learn how to DM. If you haven't watched this video yet, you should watch all the videos from the YouTubers I'm talking about here. You should watch all of them. They're in the description, they're in cards, whatever. But if you haven't watched Catastrophic Failure, watch it. I genuinely believe that if everyone watched Catastrophic Failure, we'd have a heck of a lot less horror stories to cover on this channel. And, obviously, I'm not complaining about covering horror stories. I do enjoy it. But, I would like for less people to have that problem, okay? But anyway, what happened? What was Matt Colville's Catastrophic Failure? To boil down a super long situation, essentially, Matt put his players against the wall. I like how I'm calling him Matt like I know him. I don't. Mr. Lord Colville, sir. I'm sorry. But anyway, Mr. Lord Colville, sir, put his players against the wall where they had to surrender. He expected them to surrender. Essentially, they were led into the hall of this great and powerful regent who happened to be super uber evil, and they were going to be captured. That's what he expected to happen. He expected them to surrender, they would be thrown into the cells, but luckily, he remembered something. Another one of the players, he was away at the blacksmith, and he met this guy who gave him a map of the castle and like a super master lockpick that would allow him to easily free his friends. So here's what Matt Colville thought would happen. The players would surrender after being backed against the wall, and this dwarf guy would walk in using the secret passageways, use the master key, unlock their cell, and then boom, prison break, easy peasy, let's go. However, Matt forgot a number of factors, and this isn't because Mr. Lord Colville, sir, is a bad dungeon master, because let's be honest, we all forget a lot of stuff when it comes to our player characters. How many times has a player said or done something and you respond with, "You can do that?" Because that happens to me literally every 2 weeks, okay? So yeah, Matt forgot a few things, or at least he didn't consider these few things. Like, for example, the players that were supposed to surrender, they had a super powerful artifact that this evil regent needed to solidify his rule. And they were told to keep it out of his hands at any cost. And they were like, okay, yeah, we're gonna do that, because it is within their character, not just for the characters, but also for the players, to not surrender. And this was Matt's main lesson out of this video. He took away player agency. He expected them to do something very specific to make it out, and they didn't, and it resulted in a lot of decisions that ended with him killing his boss. In-game. Sorry. This was really frustrating for the players. They felt like they had no choice in the matter, because all of the things that could have gone wrong in the session, they went wrong. I mean, seriously, Catastrophic Failure is a 33-minute video for a reason. Everything that could have gone wrong went wrong, and that is a big lesson here. When you are working with players, I disagree with the advice that they're always going to try to ruin your plans. Players are not these malevolent, malicious entities out to destroy you in your game, okay? At least good players aren't. However, if you expect players to fit into this one super specific scenario in order for everything to work out, that's not reliable, okay? I'm gonna talk about this more in a bit, but Matt expected a series of events that he thought was reasonable, but he forgot that the players have a ton of options in this moment, and he also forgot that the players genuinely want to protect this artifact. I mean, he expected them to go against their nature. They were told, and they agreed, to protect this thing at any cost, and now he's expecting them to surrender the artifact to save their own skins for just a few hours? No. They're not going to do that, right? They're going to fight. And they actually, they had good plans to get out of the situation. They weren't being stupid. They had good ideas. It just didn't work out in their favor because, again, everything that could go wrong went wrong. And that's the next lesson. Do not expect everything to just work out the way you think it's going to happen, especially when dice are involved. Dice are random, man. Even if you give your players advantage, they can still fail. I mean, for example, in my own D&D campaign, I expected my players during a night's watch would see some gnolls stalking up on them. I expected this would result in a chase scene where they chase the gnoll scouts to a mine where all the gnolls are camped, and then they fight the gnolls in this mine filled with explosives, cool mechanics, etc. I was ready for that, but they literally failed 5 perception checks and an assortment of other checks to notice the gnolls. It was insane. If something can go wrong, anticipate what will happen if something goes wrong. And that's what I did. Thank God I had an encounter ready where the gnolls ambushed them at camp, and it ended up being a good session, one of my better ones in fact. But I don't always do that, and Matt didn't do that here. He didn't anticipate so many failures, and in the end didn't anticipate the plan that the players would come across, and didn't anticipate that that plan would inevitably result in a player character death. On top of that, the other big lesson is explaining what happened from 2 angles, not just one. The angle most people go with when trying to explain why NPCs or villains do things or why something happened to the game, a lot of DMs go with the in-game angle. And Matt started with the in-game angle. He started by explaining, here's why this night lady killed you. And he explained it, and the players were like, okay, I buy that. But Matt took it a step further than that. And this is a necessary step that so many DMs hate for a reason I will never understand. But explain your reasoning as the Dungeon Master. Explain why you, as the DM, made the decisions that you made in-game. Matt Colville framed this whole thing, not just around the fact that he backed the players against the wall, but also around the fact that he never explained to them what kind of game he's running. The kind of game where sometimes when you're backed against the wall, you gotta run. You can't win every single fight. The players were working under the assumption that these fights could all be won every time, maybe even easily. But that's not the kind of game Matt runs, nor the kind of game that I run. But your players don't know that. Can they read your mind? Absolutely not. They need to be told very straightforwardly what kind of game you are trying to have. And that is why you have a friggin' session 0. Or, in Matt Colville's case, an email chain to tell everybody in not so subtle words, hey, guys, here's the kind of game I'm running. And by the way, not so subtle sometimes is used as like an insult backhandedly. This is not the time for subtlety. Matt did the right thing here by just being straight up with his players. That is good. A big lesson that I've learned about anticipating player decisions is expect players to fall within their nature. If you expect players to do the unexpected, you're going to be disappointed. The unexpected is unexpected because it's rare, it's different. You should expect the expected with your players first. And when you're predicting what you're going to do, keep that in mind. For example, my players told me very straightforward, look, we want to save as many friends as possible. In our second D&D campaign, a lot of NPCs that they liked died. And in the third D&D campaign, the campaign I'm running right now, they want to save as many NPCs as possible. So when their friend, an NPC named Marin Luzada, was bitten by a werewolf, and one of the other NPCs in the game told the players, like, you need to kill her. She is a threat to the future. Kill her now and you will save many, and you must only slay one to do it. But the players said, no, absolutely not. She's our friend. We'll find a way to get past this. And I anticipated that because my players told me that they want to save the NPCs. They want to save their friends, and Marin is their friend. Look, listen to your players. Understand why they make their decisions. I talk to my players after the game, ask them, hey, why'd you do this? Why'd you do that? Because it's not just important to build up their characters, it's also important to learn about them. Why do your players make decisions? What do they want out of the game? It'll make it so much easier for you to anticipate what they're going to choose. I mean, my players, when they are backed against a wall, when they look at impossible odds, they look at those odds and say, never tell me the odds. And they move forward anyway and find a way to get past it. That's who they are. If I put them into a seemingly impossible situation, I shouldn't anticipate them running away every time. They only run away when they think things are like, literally, we're about to die right now. If they are in a castle surrounded by gnolls with no hope of surviving the siege, they'll find a way to save the people inside. They won't abandon them because that's who my players are. Understand who your players are, and it'll make it so much easier to anticipate what they're going to do so that you can avoid some catastrophic failure. All right, well, that was fun. Like I said at the top, I do want to do this again. I had a lot of fun putting this video together. If you guys enjoyed it and want to let me know you did, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of our content, then you can check out our Tavern-adjacent podcast, where we interview some awesome D&D people and sometimes just talk about TTRPGs in general. It's linked in the cards, and while you're there, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern. Get more of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down into the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment. Anyone can have a horror story, so let me know you made it to the end of the video. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.